Thank you. Thank you for attending this evening's presentation. We know you're busy people, and we appreciate the time you're taking and the diligence you're showing to pay attention to this important issue. We're going to be discussing various aspects of the Pono Choices sex education program that have emerged after a thorough analysis by Representative Bob McDermott, his staff, and others, following the release of a complete Pono Choices curriculum to the representative on January 3rd, 2014. This is a public meeting, and we welcome everybody. But it is a discussion specifically about the Pono Choices sex education program. If you have questions or comments related to that subject, we will be happy to provide an opportunity for you to ask them during the open mic session. However, we ask that you respect the speakers and refrain from attempts to disrupt them. We're going to hear from 4 speakers, and I'd like to get things rolling immediately by introducing Representative Bob McDermott.
Thank you for coming, everyone. Let's give Keith a hand for doing a good job. We spent some time on this report, and I would be remiss that Keith did a great job helping out, but the fellow who really did all the detailed work, you see the footnotes in the back, all the documentation, is Mr. Paul Canojo. Paul, please stand up to be recognized. Paul really did a great job, and we have some great speakers tonight. Mr. Phil Lees will be joining us later. He's a world-renowned or international expert in the area of sex education. And we'll have 2 individuals speaking on the word Pono and what it means to them. I apologize for being down here at the podium. I'd like to be up there, but Keith doesn't trust me running around with a microphone. And also we found out that the lighting has to be such that if I'm up there, you can't see me. But before we begin, I'd like to introduce the most important person to me in the room tonight, and that is my wife, Utu. Honey, please stand up. Thank you. For all the Samoans who are here tonight, her name is Utu Fa'asili. So just so you know. Okay, so let's get started. Paul, why don't we go to the first slide? Okay, as you know, it took me over 45 days to get this Pono Choices curriculum. Now, it's taxpayer funded, and that's a real problem because you paid for this information. You paid for it, it's yours, you own it, and I couldn't even get a copy. So I was asking myself why. All right, Paul, next question. The department seemed to have difficulty understanding that the curriculum was a public document and that parents have the right to know what's taught in our schools. What alerted us was a parent just like you came forward and said, this is what my daughter is learning in school. She's 11 years old. Penis in anus. Now, as a father of 8, I found that somewhat troubling. So our team asked for the curriculum. We finally got it. And as far as I know, there's only 2 legislators who have it, myself and Sam Sloan. And I went through every page, 322, to include the parents' letters, the workbooks, and everything. Paul went through it probably about 5 times. Keith went through it once or twice. And we came up with a detailed report, which you have in your hands. Next slide, please. So we prepared an executive summary. What the DOE said in December was it's medically accurate, it's age appropriate, and aligned with DOE policy. We're going to refute those 3 assertions here tonight, one by one. Next slide, please. Pono Choices is medically inaccurate. It's not age appropriate for 11-year-olds to 13-year-olds. Remember, we're talking about 11-year-old children here. Pre-pubescent. Overemphasizes exponentially, I might add, alternative lifestyles without full disclosure to the parents. Fails to disclose the elevated risks of anomalous behaviors, especially with regard to HIV transmission. Next slide, please. It's contrary to state policies regarding sex educational curriculum. Treats sex before the age of consent as a viable choice. Now, these are important points. Paul, next, please. Policies and law. Laws and policies set the standards of how we want our children to learn in school. Parents have the right to rely on the DOE to follow these policy standards. When the DOE fails to do this, we lose trust. Next slide, please. Sex education curriculum must be abstinence-based, and the DOEs may teach condom use, but within the study of reproduction. Now, abstinence-based is different from abstinence-only, which is abstinence-only. Abstinence-based is what our policy is, which is a concentration on abstinence. Don't have sex, long-term monogamous relationships, et cetera, et cetera. But if you do, this is how to protect yourself. And the DOE may teach condom use in the study of human reproduction. Pono Choices does not cover human reproduction. In fact, there's a whole segment missing from the time the woman gets pregnant to the time she delivers the baby. That entire segment of that biological miracle is missing. Next section. Next slide. State-funded sex ed must be medically accurate. Hawaii revised statutes. After tonight, and more importantly, with the report you have in your hands, there's no doubt that this Pono Choices is medically inaccurate. Breathtakingly so. State-funded sex ed must be age appropriate. We don't believe it is. We can make an argument it's not, but that's a difficult thing to measure because the metrics aren't so clear. So we have to rely on state statutes to make our argument. Okay, next slide. Now we're going to talk about the medical inaccuracies. This is perhaps the most glaring part of the program because it's not correct. It's just plain not. I don't think they had a doctor participate in the writing of this because if he did, he'd be sued for malpractice because there are omissions, inaccuracies that lead you to believe that's either gross negligence at play or willful omission. Medically accurate. The genitalia, this is out of any medical dictionary, and if you have your iPhone, you can Google it. Genitalia is human reproductive organs. Human reproductive organs. They include the testes, the ovaries, the uterus. That is in the medical dictionaries. Sexual intercourse, as we commonly understand, is when a male and female mate. Next, please. Pono Choices refers to these as sexual anatomy parts and includes the anus. Next. Pono Choices defines the anus literally as genitalia. Let me say that again. In Pono Choices, they literally define the anus to be included in genitalia. Now you can see where this is problematic for a myriad of reasons. Just thinking to myself as a dad, well, when they take the SAT, they're going to get it wrong. This is genitalia. They're going to write anus. It's not. I mean, for all the other reasons, but why would you include the anus in genitalia? They do in Pono Choices. That is a fact. No doctor worth his salt would say the anus is a sexual reproductive organ. We met with 4 doctors, by the way, and they reviewed the report with me, and they all agreed with the findings, but none of them would put their name forward because they don't want to be ridiculed, picketed, or called haters. If you don't think that's true, just go to my Facebook page. Next, please. Pono Choices, here's another medical inaccuracy. Oral sex is mouth on genitals to include the anus. Again, in medical dictionaries, oral sex is mouth on genitals. It doesn't include the anus. When you include the anus, I feel like a biology teacher up here. When you include the anus, you open it up to a slew and a myriad of diseases that are not normally associated with oral sex. And it's a whole nother ball of wax. Vaginal sex enters penis. Anal sex, penis enters anus. So this is very troubling for 11-year-old children, prepubescent. Why are we why are we discussing the finer points of anal sex with 11-year-old children? I do not know. Next slide. Medically accurate information. Homosexuality is manifest in 1.5 to 4.2% of males, 0.9 to 1.8 of females. Now, these aren't Bob McDermott's numbers. These are the numbers for the Centers of Disease Control. Pono Choices, in their exercises in the workbook, represent the homosexual lifestyle fully 25% of the time. That's exponentially inaccurate. It is not a fair representation. It's about 5 times more than occurs according to the CDC statistics. So you have to ask yourself, why are we doing that? Why are we redefining the anus as a sex organ, a genital, and then why are we overemphasizing the actual occurrence of these behaviors than they occur in real life? Next, please. This is what Tara O'Neill said a few months ago. There is no reason we would be discussing gay sex in schools. And there's certainly no reason it would happen in the general curriculum. Well, it's not in the general curriculum yet, but it is in schools. And it was already in schools on November 5th. Next. So Pono Choices, the overemphasis of alternative lifestyles. What they did, the kids get a workbook. Here's the curriculum, by the way, 322 pages. The kids get a workbook, and they have exercises to do. And on one page are, they get exercises, and on one page there's 3 exercises. 1, 2, 3. 3 scenarios. The 2 heterosexual scenarios, one at the top and one at the bottom, are deemed unhealthy. And rightly so, because there's abuse taking place in the scenarios or whatever it is. The one healthy scenario is the homosexual scenario. So your 11-year-old child is presented with 3 scenarios. The 2 heterosexual are unhealthy. The only healthy scenario is the homosexual scenario. Folks, I can't make this stuff up. I mean, it's true. Another homosexual scenario in another exercise, and is, quote, Carla and her partner Sarah have been secretly dating for 7 months because they don't want people at school to bully them for being lesbians. And I just wrote in there, 11-year-old lesbians? Are you kidding me? And think of the gender confusion that these young people, as they're not even in puberty yet, they have their best friend. This is my best friend. Are you a lesbian? Boys or girls? 2 boys, best friends. Are you gay? Homosexual? This is just not age appropriate. Next slide, please. So we believe it's not age appropriate, obviously. Next slide, Paul. All of this, the anal sex, the various scenarios, it's all done under the guise of STD prevention. We're told, well, you got to tell the kids about it because there's kids out there having anal sex. And you got to tell them about these various behaviors because they're going to do it anyway, and you got to do it. Okay. Male-on-male anal sex poses an approximately 1,800% greater risk of HIV transmission. 18 times greater. Yet in Pono Choices, throughout the curriculum, all the male, female, homosexual behaviors are all deemed equally risky. They're not being truthful with the kids. And worse, they omit the riskiest behavior of all, which we'll get to. Next, please. So Pono Choices tries to level the playing field by omitting. It's not there. The extremely high risk of HIV with homosexual sex when it quizzes the students. Now, this is right out of the book. Penis in vagina with condom, low risk. Penis in vagina without condom, high risk. It's rated as a high-risk behavior, mind you. Penis and anus with condom is low risk. That's medically inaccurate, which we will show you. Penis and anus without condom, they forgot to put it in the book. How can that be? All this talk about anal sex and the riskiest behavior of all, they omit it. Next, please. Top slide. Condoms provide some protection, but anal intercourse is simply too dangerous to practice. That is on the Food and Drug Administration website today. Today. Tonight, as you came in, that's on their website. So that's with a condom. Now, we're telling the kids that anal sex with a condom is okay. It's low risk. The FDA says it's too dangerous to practice. So who's right? I don't know who wrote Pono Choices. Can't tell you because nobody signed on to it. Pono Choices, anal sex with a condom is low risk. Next, please. The truth, anal sex is unhealthy at best and lethal at worst. 1,800% higher risk. They never say it's unhealthy. They never tell you all the problems you'll have if you practice it on a regular basis, if you practice it at all. They don't say any of that. This is supposed to be about students' health and safety. There's an inconsistency here. Next, please. Okay, this is a video. It's about 3 minutes long. It's Dr. Miriam Grossman. She is a psychiatrist who treats young people with sexual disorders. And she will tell you, I just told you there's a difference between vaginal sex and anal sex. I want you to hear it from the doctor. Go ahead, Paul.
The vagina has these different properties. It has a low pH, which inactivates the HIV particle. The mucus has certain proteins that fight HIV. The lining is thick. There's stretching because the vagina obviously is a birth canal, and it's made to deliver a big 10-pound baby. So the vagina is constructed in a completely different way from the rectum, which is made differently. And also the rectum, I discovered in my research, has a kind of cell called an M cell. And those cells, I write about it in my book, they actually take HIV and deliver it right into the lymphatic system, which is where it wants to get to infect the person. So M cells are very dangerous, and you don't have them in the vagina. So these are some of the reasons why, for the transmission of HIV, anal intercourse is at least 20 to 30 times more dangerous than vaginal intercourse. Now, I like to give students and my patients the same advice that a friend of mine, whose name is John Potterat, gave to his kids. John, for 30 years, was the director of all the STD and AIDS programs in a city called Colorado Springs. And he's authored about 200 publications about STDs, so he's really an expert. Before his kids became sexually active, he told them, the anus is an exit, not an entrance. This is not the Bible, he told them. This is science. Nature put a tight sphincter, a muscle that stays closed, at the entrance of the anus for a reason. Keep out.
Okay. Paul, next slide. So we contend it's not Pono to misrepresent male homosexual sex in an effort to make the practice more palatable. So we've talked about the omission of the risk. We've talked about the omission of it being unhealthy. Okay, Paul, go to the next one. Medically accurate info. Unfortunately, condoms do not do an adequate job of protecting against the HPV virus or herpes simplex virus. Pono Choices says sex with a condom is prescribed as low risk. We will get to the HPV virus in a moment, but herpes and HPV can be transmitted even if you have a condom on. In fact, there's an epidemic of it. 25% of young women have HPV. 25% of sexually active young women have HPV, even if they practice safe sex, because you can get it from skin-to-skin contact. And a young woman's cervix is not mature enough to fight off diseases and viruses, as you will see in a few moments. sex with condom is presented as a low-risk activity, but for these viruses, it's not low risk. It's high risk, even if they wear a condom and practice safe sex. Next question. How does a baby develop? Well, I don't know. If I go through Pono Choices, I have no idea. Because they stop at get pregnant, don't get pregnant, pregnant, you get pregnant, and then they skip to, you're going to have to buy a baby carriage. That's going to cost you $150. If you have a C-section, that's an extra $2,500. They skip the whole gestation development period, which is required if you're going to teach a class regarding usage of condoms. Our policy, remember back at the beginning, you can teach a class with, you can teach it with condoms, but it's got to be in a human reproduction course, and we don't teach human reproduction in this course. We just tell you, don't get pregnant, use a condom. But if you do get pregnant, it's going to cost you a lot of money, and here's what it's going to cost you. Okay? Next slide, please. So to amplify that fact, pregnancy or pregnant 270 times, vaginal or vagina 90, sperm, spermicide, penis or penile 49, egg 44. Anus is mentioned 37 times in a human reproduction class. Why is it even in there? Next. Breastfeeding 17 times, fallopian tube 5, cervix 3. Zygote, blyoplast, embryo, or fetus is never mentioned. So how can it be a human reproduction class if you never talk about the baby? It's not. Therefore, it's in violation of state policy because it's not a human reproduction class. Next, please. We do not teach reproduction. This was from a teacher who Facebooked me, who was angry with me, sent me a private message on the Facebook, said I don't know what I'm talking about, and besides, it's not a reproduction class. We don't teach reproduction. Jim, if you subpoena me, I can give you the name and address, but you'll... Next, please. So we've gone through the medical inaccuracies. We've discussed how we don't believe it coincides with state policy. I mean, we've showed it. They don't even mention the fetus at all, not one time. So it's not a reproduction class. Therefore, it's in violation of state policy. Not age appropriate. Next slide. Only 5% of children have had sex before age 13. Now, that doesn't mean they're having sex regularly. That just means that 5%, according to this data, which is unreliable at best, according, when you're interviewing 13-year-old kids. But that's what the best we can get, DHS, Department of Health and Human Services statistics. But Pono Choices never makes any attempt to explain or justify why children as young as 11 need to openly discuss homosexual relationships or why they need to learn about anal sex. It never tells you why. Next, please. Biology says that the cervix is the cervix is a way biology tells girls to wait to become sexually active. It's immature and vulnerable to infection. Young girls, when they have sex, the cervix is not fully developed, and we're going to show a video on that in a moment. But Pono Choices doesn't disclose this. And the immaturity of the cervix is why it's almost like a magnet for these viruses and diseases. Paul, why don't... okay, here is Dr. Grossman. Go back, Paul. Talking about why young girls should wait before they have sex for medical reasons, not political reasons. Go ahead, Paul.
Why is it so easy for this virus to infect girls? It's because of their immature cervix. The cervix is the entrance to the uterus, and what you're looking at here on the left side is a photo of the cervix itself. The central area is called the transformation zone, and it is circled with a yellow marking. And on the right side of the slide, you see a diagram. The diagram indicates that the area that's in the center of the cervix there is only covered by one layer of cells. That the right part of that diagram shows one layer of cells. And this solitary layer is very easy for viruses and bacteria to penetrate.
Okay. So there's a doctor telling you why. So this goes back to age appropriate. Young girls are not ready, and their body tells them this, not us. The cervix doesn't become fully mature until their later teen years. BOE regulations require instructional staff or administration notify parents or legal guardians of controversial issues that will be discussed in the classroom or through school activities. This policy, when followed, can keep the curriculum age appropriate, but it needs to be followed. You see, it's up to us doing what we're doing tonight to put pressure on the school and the administrators and the principals to make sure the material is consistent with community values and norms and age appropriate. We're the guardians of this. Go ahead, Paul. Pono Choices Parent Night Disclosure Letter does disclose the use of condoms on wooden demonstrators during instruction, but does not disclose the references to anal sex, oral sex, or discussion of homosexual relationships. So what happens is you get a letter sent home to you saying, we're going to discuss sex ed with your child. It could be controversial. And then you get another letter inviting you. You can opt out. That's the opt-out letter. It is totally benign, generic. It doesn't list anything with any specificity. It just says you may consider it controversial. It's a boilerplate letter. So if you don't opt out, you get invited to Parents' Night. And Parents' Night, they tell you, well, we're going to talk about a condom, and that's about it. So you're busy, you've got 2 jobs, you're working, you don't go. What they don't tell you, even at Parents' Night, is they're going to talk about anal oral sex and the discussion of homosexual relationships. Remember again, the discussion of these alternative lifestyles is all done under the guise of STD prevention. But as we already talked about, the deadliest behavior of all, they omit, either through it's a willful omission or gross negligence, but it's unacceptable. Next. So it is a crime for anyone to engage in sexual penetration with a person under 14. Consent is irrelevant. So don't get confused with age of consent here. Your state legislature has said to penetrate anyone under 14 is a crime. To penetrate someone under 14. So if it's a 15 and 13-year-old, it's still a crime. Now, that person probably won't go to jail or anything like that, but we have decided that a 13-year-old is not mature enough to make those decisions. But Pono Choices tells 11-year-olds, again, 11-year-old, this is what's shocking me because I'm a dad with an 11-year-old at home. You can use many of these STD prevention methods, whether you choose abstinence or choose to have sex. Take responsibility for your sexual health. You're telling 11-year-olds, it's up to you. It's up to you. I find this shocking. Next, please. So how do we solve the problem? So we identified some of the challenges there. So how do we solve this problem? Well, we took a step yesterday by having a lot of folks, some of them who are in this room, going to the Board of Education and sharing with them our concerns. They're volunteers. They're from the community. And they work for us. Sometimes we in office forget that. Next, please. They got to discontinue or revise Pono Choices. My recommendation is get rid of it. It is solely interwoven. It is interwoven with, it is replete with medical inaccuracies. And the glaring and willful omissions, there's no way to reconcile that. Again, they tell us you got to prevent diseases and you got to prevent unwanted pregnancy. So this whole program, the way they get the anal sex component in there, this is how they get it in there. Well, some people are going to do it and you can't, it's science, you got to talk about it, and it's to prevent STDs. Okay, fair enough. But if you're going to do that, you've got to tell the risks as well. I use the percentage 1,800%. Dr. Grossman used 3,000%. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I went on the low side. She said 3,000%. That's 30 times. 3,000%. 30 times greater risk. How can you omit that? That's negligence. Seek input from parents on the design of the curriculum. Find a consensus. Sex education in your communities should come from you. It should be organic from the community. They should meet, put a notice out, and you decide in your community what you want your children to learn, what you're comfortable with. Teach it at home. We're going to get to that. Stop pretending that sexual intercourse is a valid activity for children under 14. I mean, this is the entry level program, 11 to 13. I don't want to see what the 14-year-olds are learning. Remember the sex assault law. Penetration for someone under 14 is illegal. And what came to my mind during this whole program is it fails at any point to warn children about predators, about unwanted adult touching. Think about that. All this talk about anal sex, which is the method of operation for these predators, and we don't even tell the kids about predators. There's nothing in there about unwanted adult touching or the creepy uncle from down the hall. So the 11-year-old says, well, I must have learned about it in school. I guess it's okay. There's nothing in here, not even call this number to report a predator, or this is what predatory behavior looks like. Next, please. Should teach all stages of human reproduction. If you don't, you can't talk about condoms. You're in violation of the policy. Disclose all elevated risks of anal sex. If anal sex at all is discussed, you can't have it both ways. You can't talk about it and then ignore the risks. If you're going to talk about it, and I don't think it's appropriate to talk about it in a reproduction class because it's not reproduction, but if you're going to talk about it, you've got to disclose the risks. And the risks are lethal. Encourage abstinence and monogamy. Not one word in this 322 pages is the word monogamy mentioned. Never once. The goal of a long-term monogamous relationship is never mentioned. In fact, they have cartoons where there's multiple partners. Now, 11-year-olds. You have two partners. They've each had 3 partners. How does a high school kid, we hear a lot of talk about suicide. How does a high school student feel when they're a junior, they've never had a date, and they're getting this material saying they should have already had 3 sexual partners at age 11? Next, please. Consider other curricula. They got 7 other programs out there that haven't had this sort of uproar or complaints about. They should go to those. They're abstinence-based. They've stood the test of time, but I'm going to review them. Review the proprietary. Paul, how do you say it? Propriety. That's one of them big words. That fancy book learning Paul got. That's his word. Of the use of the term Pono in Pono Choices. Is it Pono? I don't think so, but that's just my opinion. Next, please. Consider your opt-out rights. You don't have to have your kids go through this. Unfortunately, we're targeting the Native Hawaiian population right now and hijack the word Pono, and I don't think that's proper. Befriend your child's teacher. Show them alternative lesson plans that you'd like your child to use. Most importantly, continue to love, embrace, and talk to your children. Be there for your kids. And finally, the quality and importance of our communications at home strongly influences our children's life. You got to talk to your children. It's up to us to inculcate them with the values we want. We live in a changing world. There are a lot of different forces at play here, and we have a conflict between what we traditionally thought were normal and accepted behaviors and these new behaviors that are being forced on us. But they're being forced on us in a sneaky way through our kids. They're not fully disclosing what they're doing, as we've demonstrated. They're not following their own policy because they're not teaching reproduction yet, introducing condoms. I mean, there are a myriad of things that are wrong with this program, which we document and we detail in that report. And just some final thoughts. We put that report on Facebook, and people have downloaded it. A lot of people. We've had 20,000 hits on it, believe it or not. Let's give Keith a hand for that, 20,000 hits. A shadowy figure. Not one person in the comments of the detractors have come in and said, well, page 6, you made a mistake because HPV is not, you know. No one has refuted what we've said. It's bulletproof because Paul did a great job. So thank you, Paul. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Keith. I will be around. I'll stay till the end, of course. And Keith has someone to introduce to you.
Thanks, Rob. Good stuff. Working for Bob is an adventure in multitasking. So our next speaker is going to have to leave his workstation at the PowerPoint projector and put on his lawyer hat and join us for a few words. I'd like to introduce you to Paul Choice. He's our session attorney. And the chief researcher on the information you just saw. Paul?
Good evening. I'm Paul Choice. I'm the representative staff attorney. I'm sorry. I was very honored when the representative asked me to add a word tonight. Let me just say I'm speaking as a native Hawaiian, but I don't pretend to speak on behalf of the. Sorry about that. I'm here. I speak as a native Hawaiian, but please don't misunderstand me. I don't pretend to speak for all native Hawaiians, but there's over 500,000 of us in the country. Every one of us has a right to his or her own opinion. But I'd just like to submit, I don't think we can describe this curriculum as Pono. There's a lot of positive aspects here. If you look at the curriculum, there's a lot of discussion of Hawaiian culture, and that's good. It's good that we have these aspects to separate, to differentiate it from mainland curriculum. But as many of you know, the word Pono means, it can mean goodness, uprightness, morality. Don't take my word for it. There's this dictionary here. You can look it up at the library. But I'm just going to ask the following: Is it Pono to tell 11-year-olds about anal sex, but not disclose that fact to parents when you send a disclosure letter? Is it Pono to call sex with a condom as low-risk activity, but not tell them, well, the dangers of contracting HPV or herpes, even when a condom is used? I think the answer is no. Is it Pono to treat the anus, which is an exit for feces? Is it appropriate to Pono to treat that as an entrance for sexual activity? I think the answer is no. So if we're going to call the curriculum Pono, I submit that some changes need to be made. Should the changes be up to me? Of course not. I'm just one guy. I'm just one Hawaiian guy. And are there other Hawaiians who might disagree with me? I guess. But that's the point. There's going to be a lot of different opinions out there. And so let's try to put our heads together and find a consensus. Now, I will say, I realize that there's an organization called Alulike, a very good organization. They were consultants on this curriculum. I'm not here to bash them or attack them. I think they really care about the Hawaiian community. But it's a good step to consult Alulike, but it's not a sufficient step. It's not enough. You have to go to the ordinary Hawaiian folks. Now, it's harder to do that. It's easy to go to Alulike. They have staff, they have resources. But it's harder to go to everyday Hawaiian folks who are just trying to live their lives, trying to get by in the economy. But it has to be done. And so please reach out. I would ask the DOE to reach out to the broader Hawaiian community, not just consult one organization. Now, very soon, there's going to be a man named Phil Lees, very smart guy. He's a Haole guy from Canada, but I think he has a lot of interesting things to say. We as Hawaiians should consider what he has to say. He has a heart for reaching out to the community, reaching out to parents, and so we can adapt what he says and we can say, okay, here's what might work for Hawaii, and adapt his ideas and make our own curriculum as we see fit. Thank you very much.
Next, I'd like to call to the podium another West Side legislator, Representative Karen Awana.
Thank you for, here we go. Thank you for that warm welcome. Aloha and good evening, everyone. I'd like to first take this opportunity to thank Representative McDermott and his staff for organizing this gathering and enlightening us all on the Department of Education's Pono Choices curriculum. And as you have just seen and heard, this program is far from being Pono. In our Hawaiian culture, I was raised to believe that our children are most precious to us. They are our future, and they will one day take care of our generation and foster the next. This program is an effort to indoctrinate our children in our public school system, and it has masked itself as culturally responsive teen pregnancy and STI prevention program. Pono Choices has written a curriculum that leads people into believing that homosexual relations are normal and healthy, while heterosexual relations are abnormal and unhealthy. This is not Pono, and this is not right. The Hawaiian Dictionary by Mary Kavenapukui and Samuel H. Ubert defines Pono as being accurate. The information in the PowerPoint has stated that the DOE says that the anus is a body part used to create humans. This is not Pono, and this is definitely not right. Another definition of Pono is equity. The curriculum creates an environment to make heterosexual youth question their relationship with those of the same gender. Why can't girls be friends with girls or boys be friends with boys? Of course they can, but this program misleads children to believe otherwise. This is an unnecessary burden placed upon our children, our keiki. And this is not Pono, and this is not right. Thank you. As a Kanaka Mo'oli who has lived here all my life, I have friends and family members who are of the GLBT persuasion. Because I do not practice their ways, that will not stop me from continuing to care for them as I always have. But at the same time, there needs to be a level of respect where my views, my values, and my ideals, and those who share the same views, ideals, and values should not be made to feel less than because of who we are and what we believe. This DOE program fails to create equality. This DOE program fails to provide accurate information to parents. Instead, the opt-out form skims through the curriculum like the wind, not providing information which may be questionable to parents, not being Pono to parents, not being right. I know that my Hawaii can become better than this. With all of your continued help, we can get there, and it will be a lot of heartache and sacrifice. I know I can do it, and I know you can do it, and I know we can do it. Again, I thank Representative McDermott, his staff, and later you will hear from Mr. Phil Lees, and all of you for being here tonight. Please stay connected, and please stay in touch. Mahalo.
Thank you very much, Karen. Next, we'd like to bring up our heavy hitter, Mr. Phil Lees from Canada, visiting us from the frozen north and probably enjoying every minute of it. Mr. Lees is a retired teacher and university instructor and an expert on the processes that we're now experiencing here in Hawaii because they lived it for several years in Canada. Mr. Lees?
Great. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here and to share with you. I have to be honest, coming here, I start to get a swelled head, you know, because I'm not an expert, but I've experienced what's happened. And I happen to come across other people like myself in England, Australia, New Zealand, Massachusetts, California, Minnesota, that are going through the exact same experiences. This is a process. There is a goal. And I think you need to know that what you're experiencing here is being experienced in jurisdictions around the world. What you have here, though, is somebody that is going to stand up and dig down, get the evidence, and say, wait a minute, this isn't Pono. You are very, very fortunate. In my country, Canada, we don't have legislators like Bob. We don't. They hide. They're afraid of those people that are the activists that are pushing the agenda. And I'm going to share a little bit with you. Presentation that I do. What I did today, I didn't know how much time, Bob, we had. I just have all the slides in there, and the ones that I think are going to relate to what Bob has said and build on that, we'll talk about them, okay? When I start my presentation, and many of you know, I was here last fall during the SB1 session, and that was an honor to be flown all around the islands, and again, just to share the pattern, what's happened, okay? And I start off the talk by saying, you know what? We're in an experiment. You heard about the frog in the kettle experiment? All right, you put a frog in a pot of water, and you very, very gently, not quickly, slowly, increase the temperature, and the frog just gradually acclimatizes and adjusts. Social scientists tell us our attitudes and values change the same way. We need to watch out for that and start to detect when the temperature is changing and when it's not right. Okay? Next slide, please. In Canada, we approved same-sex marriage in 2005. And for us, we found that was the tipping point. And a tipping point when it comes to curriculum. And as a teacher in the public school system, I was experiencing the changes. Next slide. As a teacher, hopefully it's going to proceed. As a teacher in the school system, and even as a student, there was always times when there was some sensitive curriculum. In the 1980s, we had a few novels that were sensitive. And as I shared this last fall, people would say, they saw the title, say, oh yeah. And so what happened? Well, you were often, if it was a concern, you'd get a different novel to use. Next slide. Hopefully. Keep our fingers crossed. All right. In the 1990s, in the 2000s, we started moving into comprehensive sex ed. The comprehensive sex ed, at this time, it's kind of in some ways like Pono Choices in that it started to teach about anal and oral sex, but it was supplementary. And teachers were told, you know, this might be something you want to add to your curriculum. Some families expressed some concern. And in 1996, my daughter saw something in grade 5 that upset her. She came home. And I said, okay, no problem. We'll go and we'll talk about it. We went through a process with the school, with the system, found out what the video was and all the rest of it. And then a lot of families started to express some concern. No, we don't like this. So what happened was they set up a committee. Because we brought the evidence about what is healthy sex. And, next slide. Keep our fingers crossed. Yes. And if you go around the city of Hamilton, where I'm from, and you look at the bus shelters, these bus shelters were installed as a result of the research that was done, and they're put in by public health, and it's the I'm Worth the Wait campaign. I'm not ready to have sex because, all right, the focus in our sex ed curriculum became focused on abstinence, and within 2 years, teen pregnancies in the city of Hamilton, which had the highest teen pregnancy rate in our province of Ontario, dropped 22%. 2 years, okay? So thank you. If people that are concerned, traditional-minded people, get involved and get engaged, you can make a difference. That's the reason why I put that slide in. Next slide, please. All right, so before same-sex marriage, 2005, our curriculum was primarily comprehensive sex ed, we had some LGBT alternative family instruction coming in the form of storybooks and things like that in our primary grades. But that was all supplementary material. We also had a couple of high schools in our province that had gay-straight alliance clubs. But again, it was supplementary material. If you wanted your child not to participate, you could opt out. We had a similar opt-out clause that you have. Next slide. All right. In the 1990s, where was this starting to come from, this supplementary materials? In the 1990s, there was an organization founded called GLSEN. GLSEN created this manual on how to change the attitudes and values of society. And in the mission statement, it says we're going to end discrimination. And I'm going to tell you, I'm all for that. I don't think we should be bullying anyone, including those who may be effeminate, homosexual, whatever. All right? We're going to end discrimination. But it says in here, under community oppression, an example of community oppression is when a lesbian attends a house of worship that teaches homosexuality as a sin. That's their goal. That's their objective. Next slide, please. Who founded GLSEN? Kevin Jennings, President Obama's education czar. He was from Hawaii, a graduate of Radford, and he was bullied. He was a great teacher. In Massachusetts, after he retired, or not retired, after he graduated, he's a teacher. He brought together 70 of his friends, and they founded GLSEN. And in this manual, it says we're going to use the word safety as a calling card to further the organization's goals in schools. Okay, next slide. Why schools? Well, 1998, they wrote this book, Queering Elementary Education. And the book said, in the foreword, says, children learn prejudice from many sources, families, the media, religious institutions. But the fact remains that schools are the place where children spend most of their time. So if we're going to change the attitudes of society, we've got to focus on the schools. And in this book, it talks about, well, where can we bring in LGBT themes into the schools? Next slide. 2005, just like in 2013, our tipping point for us was same-sex marriage. Yours was same-sex marriage. All right? Next slide. All right. After same-sex marriage, we started passing policies, legislation, and that mandated instruction in our schools about homosexual activity. Not just sex ed, but starting in our primary grades. Next slide. We revised the health curriculum. And when we revised the health curriculum in 2010, it was similar to your Pono Choices. But it wasn't just for grade 7 and 8. Grade 1, students are going to have to identify the genitalia of male and female. And I'm talking in detail. I'm talking in detail. Not just that's a male, that's a female. Grade 2, we're going to talk about sexual orientation and gender identity. The fact that being male or female has little to do with physical anatomy. It has more to do with the clothes you wear, the music you listen to, the activities you participate in, and gender can change. This is grade 2. Grade 3, 4, puberty and physical and social changes that used to take place in grade 6 and 7 was brought down to grade 4, but grade 6, personal pleasure through masturbation, vaginal lubrication. Grade 7, sex acts, anal and oral sex was brought into the curriculum. Now, at this time, we also expressed concern. And in our legislature, the premier had this offensive section of the curriculum removed, all right? And in our legislature, we were called right-wing homophobes. It's in the minutes in our legislature, all right? But we had expressed the same concerns. So we talked about the medical accuracy. And everything Bob is telling you, we found the same evidence. Next slide. After same-sex marriage, because they couldn't revise the curriculum and put on the website, this is something that's going to happen here. Because when you put the curriculum on the website, people respond. They say, we don't want that, if they can't hide it. So what they do is they created a teacher resource document. This is a 200-page document that tells teachers how to integrate a positive LGBT message into the curriculum starting in grade 1. Okay? And our teachers say, Phil, we have to integrate a positive, affirmative LGBT message every subject, every grade, every day. All right? We'll talk a little bit more about it. Page 10 of this book says, however, in the frequently asked questions, teachers, you're not to inform families of sensitive curriculum. Now, this is not ministry policy. This is not provincial policy. This is a guideline. But when the teachers get this, they think, oh, I guess this is our official board guidelines and policies. All right? So this is deception. Next slide. And again, this is not just my province, Ontario. This is happening in other jurisdictions. All right? Our Accepting Schools Act mandating GSA clubs, lifestyle instruction restrictions. But you know what? Restrictions on schools. And I think something's come up in your legislation about people, if a church rents school facilities, you have to follow the state religion. Okay? Next slide. When we put this legislation in place, we asked the Minister of Education, what's the intent? I think if you press the next. And our Minister of Education at the time said, and this is not just our province. We hear this over and over in other jurisdictions. And I heard similar statements here last fall. Next slide, or yeah, if you hit next slide, I think, there we go. The government's goal of the bill is to change the traditional values in society and change them for good. And again, this is not just, you're not experiencing this just here in Hawaii. This is international. And I got to tell you, the opposition is targeting Hawaii for a reason. The entire world knows where Hawaii is. And Hawaii will be the mirror to the rest of the world. So, Bob, we applaud you. Here's something else, though. Once we fix our Human Rights Commissioner, similar to what's your Hawaii Civil Rights, said, and once we fix the secular public schools and Catholic schools, private schools are next, and then our Alberta government, another province, like another state, they started trying to pass legislation telling homeschoolers you could not bring anything to do with your faith into the classroom setting in your home. Okay? The only reason why that legislation did not pass is because an election was called and all legislation dies. Next slide. And this is not just Canada. Did you hear what happened in the European Union? They just mandated all countries in the European Union must embrace homosexual rights or there'll be economic sanctions. Okay? If you're going to change the values of society, you're going to have some significant strategies, okay? And those strategies are starting. Pono Choices is just the tip. It's just the tip. GSA clubs, Gay Straight Alliance clubs. All right? And those are clubs for students that self-identify as homosexual, bisexual, transgendered, etc. Sexual lifestyle instruction integrated, all subjects, all grade levels. And third, school rental agreements saying, you can't rent any public property unless you follow the state religion. Next slide. So let's look at some of these strategies. GSA clubs. Again, clubs based on sexual activity preference. All right? These clubs play a leadership role in schools when it comes to assemblies on discrimination, bullying, etc. Right? They play a leadership role. Let me share with you a video of a gentleman named Dan Savage. Dan Savage is an LGBT activist, and he's a GSA club promoter. He's speaking at a high school assembly to secondary students about a discrimination topic. And what Dan shares has been shared in my schools, in my high schools, in Canada, during GSA assemblies. Please, if it's ready.
the Bible. We'll just talk about the Bible for a second. People often point out that they can't help it. They can't help with the anti-gay bullying, because it says right there in Leviticus, it says right there in Timothy, it says right there in Romans that being gay is wrong. We can learn to ignore the bullshit in the Bible about gay people the same way we have learned to ignore the bullshit in the Bible about shellfish, about slavery, about dinner, about farming, about menstruation, about virginity, about masturbation. We ignore bullshit in the Bible about all sorts of things. The Bible is a radically pro-slavery document. Slave owners waved Bibles over their heads during the Civil War and justified it. The shortest book in the New Testament is a letter from Paul to a Christian slave owner about owning his Christian slave. And Paul doesn't say Christians don't own people. Paul talks about how Christians own people. We ignore what the Bible says about slavery because the Bible got slavery wrong. Sam Harris, in Letter to a Christian Nation, points out that the Bible got the easiest moral question that humanity has ever faced wrong: slavery. What are the odds that the Bible got something as complicated as human sexuality wrong? 100%. The Bible says that if your daughter's not a virgin on her wedding night, if a woman isn't a virgin on her wedding night, she shall be dragged to her father's doorstep and stoned to death. Callista Gingrich lives. And there is no effort to amend state constitutions to make it legal to stone women to death on their wedding night if they're not virgins. At least not yet. We don't know where the GOP is going these days. People are dying because people can't clear this one last hurdle. They can't get past this one last thing in the Bible about homosexuality. One other thing I want to talk about is, so you can tell the Bible guys in the hall, they can come back now because I'm done beating up the Bible. It's funny, as someone who's on the receiving end of beatings that are justified by the Bible, how pansy-ass some people react when you push back. So I apologize if I hurt anyone's feelings, but I have a right to defend myself and to point out the hypocrisy of people who justify anti-gay bigotry by pointing to the Bible and insisting we must live by the code of Leviticus on this one issue and no other.
That was Christian students walking out, okay? In my country, the students aren't allowed to leave. That happened in the high school 10 minutes from my house. And when we asked the school board, we said, this is what the students said happened. The school board did not deny it. We asked for the transcript. They wouldn't give it to us. Well, yes, we could say it's bullying. Next, if we can go back to the PowerPoint. Sorry about the difficulty there, Paul. Then the second strategy was integrate every subject, every grade level, positive LGBT messaging. Okay? So we're going to look at that next. And what's that going to look like? Well, in this manual, teachers are told, when in grade 1, you're doing a unit on the community, you're going to read stories about Heather has 2 mommies, Daddy has a roommate, Debbie goes to gay pride, storybooks about alternative lifestyles. In grade 2, we're going to talk about gender fluidity. As a matter of fact, there's even a unit in grade 2. Oh, thank you. If we can go to the next slide. Well, here's an example in our schools. We talk about GSA clubs. Here are the posters, and somebody talked about posters. Here's a poster on the left. It says, we're here, we're queer, and we're in your school. It's kind of a real friendly, aloha spirit, isn't it? The other one, love has no gender. And here you see girls holding hands, guys holding hands, girls holding hands with 2 guys, guys holding hands with 2 girls. So, you know, it even talks, and this is in our primary. This is in our elementary schools. We're talking grades 4, 5, and 6. Okay. In the post. Next one. Hopefully, we're on the right track now. Next slide. They say that we're trying to get rid of bullying, but when you do the surveys, the number one reason for bullying has to do with race. Actually, religion is about number 3 on the list. Sexual orientation is about 13 or 14. Not that we should diminish the importance of doing away with it, but we need to address all bullying. All right, next slide. We'll just keep going. Keep going. This document says, hey, this is our policy document, says, we're going to have activities in our schools, including, that demonstrate diversity, including gay pride parades. I don't know, do you have a gay pride parade here in Honolulu? Yep, okay, yep. Next. All right, community units. We're going to integrate every subject, every grade level. Community units I talked about. Music class. We're going to sing songs about alternative families. Gay pride parades in our schools. We're going to have transgender days, cross-dressing days. We actually have these in our schools. Drama class assignments portraying LGBT issues. Okay? And when a student says, sir, I don't feel comfortable. Could I have a different topic? This has actually been told to a student. What's the matter with you? What's the matter? You live in a box? This is society. This is what our society is like. And all right, that's really, understanding of people's needs. Math class problems. If we're going to talk about, are going to have to include, just as naturally as everything else, same-sex families in math problems. When I talked to a textbook publisher of mine, I said, how's this going to affect your textbooks, Bart? He says, we have to have a disproportionate representation of alternative sexual lifestyles in our textbooks. I said, give me an example. He says, remember Pythagorean's theorem, right angle triangle, and you're trying to find the length of the hypotenuse? The practical application is a carpenter trying to find the length of a rafter. He said in our textbook, the carpenter is very clearly a cross-dressing carpenter. He says, we have to do it or our textbooks will not be accepted. All right? Queer hero strategy. This is not my terminology. This is terminology used by ministries of education internationally. All right? And we're going to identify people who've been successful that are homosexual. Okay? Textbook, science textbook says Roberta Bondar, Canadian scientist, who happened to go up on one of your space shuttles, used to say Roberta Bondar was a Canadian scientist who, now it says Roberta Bondar, a lesbian Canadian scientist. Okay, we have to identify their sexual orientation. But we don't have to do so if they're heterosexual. Okay? All right? This document that I shared with you, and this is going to come here. All right? It's going to come here. This document, something like it, follows what's called the Banks Continuum. This is an American term. And the Banks Continuum says this: we're not satisfied with just adjusting kids' attitudes to tolerating and accepting others. We're going to take them through a series of progressive attitude conditioning activities to change their attitudes from accepting through to supporting, admiring, appreciating, and celebrating. And at the top, it's engaging. Next slide, please. This is, and that's not my picture. That's a teachers' union poster. All right, let me give you an example of some lessons, okay? And I got to tell you, last fall, when I was touring Hawaii, teachers came up to me and said, Phil, this stuff is in our classrooms now. Okay? Grade 1. All right, we're going to read a story called Glory Goes to Gay Pride. We're going to discuss about different kinds of families, right? We're all in a circle sitting on the floor, okay? We've read the story. Now, I want you to demonstrate to me that you understand that people do, there are different kinds of love, different kinds of families. So I'm going to give you some magazines so you can cut out some pictures. We're going to glue them down to some paper, and I want you to see if you can find as many different kinds of love and families, all right? So here's some examples. Here are your magazines. Next slide. Sorry. There we go. All right. Now, one of the policies that your school board is going to be pressured to accept is schools must build positive relations with the LGBT support organizations in the community. All right? And they're the ones bringing the magazines in. Okay? Next slide. So you've demonstrated to me that you understand that you do have people with different love and families. All right, I want to now we're going to do another example. It could be grade 2. It doesn't have to be grade 2. It could be grade 3. It could be, but after this. And we have a unit called Both And. You can Google search it, and you'll find it. Okay, it's a unit. It's received all kinds of awards. And we're going to read a story about a gender-neutral child who tries being a boy, tries being a girl, talks about what it's like, discusses what it's like. And we have a cross-dressing center at the back of the room. And you're going to dress as a person of a different gender and live like a girl if you're a guy, live like a guy if you're a girl, and write about it, draw about it. We'll talk about it. Now, so do you see us going up the steps? Just from accepting through to now start. Yep, we're going up the steps. Next slide. Oh, and these are all in this document. Oh, this is an international. This is a document on the website, and it's being used in other countries as well now. As a matter of fact, it's been recognized by the United Nations, Bob. Okay. Grade 3. Oh, the best way I can describe this one is I get this phone call. I have to get this phone call. A grandmother called and says, my grandson came home and married his best friend, Jimmy. I said, what happened? I said, what grade's he in? Grade 3. 8 years old. I said, what happened? Well, they read this book, Daddy's Wedding, and that's fine. I'm not opposed to knowledge. They read this book, Daddy's Wedding, and then this guy comes in dressed like a pastor and says, isn't it fantastic? We live in a country like Canada. Not like, and he starts naming other states, and he starts naming other countries. Then he says, which are discriminatory and are hateful and are bigots and are... And then says, wouldn't it be fantastic if you could marry somebody that you get along with really well? Who would that be? Well, I said, well, my best friend Jimmy, you know. I said, all right, propose, and they have this mass same-sex wedding ceremony in grade 3, and they celebrate with cake and ice cream. Okay? Recognized by the United Nations. Okay? Do you see us going up the steps? Right? And when I do this presentation, I get through it a little bit faster, and somebody says, and that's only grade 3. Next slide. Grade 7 and 8, we're going to go to theatrical productions about kids coming out. And that's okay, but next slide has to do with the discussion that takes place. I think if I have it on here. There we go. The next slide, the person is a consultant with the school board, and the person is presenting a biased position. Was presenting a biased position. I got the dope on it all, and here it is. The person, Jay Wallace of Halton, is a female who's a transgendered male, is married to a female transgendered male, raising their child, Stanley, who is a female biologically, as a male. And this person is telling our kids the right ways to live. Anyway, next slide, please. Who's in charge? And this, I think you got to know about who's in charge. Planned Parenthood in our country is now writing the curriculum. We've got a curriculum in Toronto for our LGBT, our trans and queer youth, and it's called the queer curriculum, the queer sex ed curriculum. Next slide. Which I think it might be similar to Pono Choices. All right. Here's a poster in a grade 7 class. It was found last fall. And when it came up in the press, the school board said the final result was it's safe sex information in a grade 7 class. It's safe sex information because it's about, well, use a condom when you're doing oral sex and things like that. And the other thing we have to realize, there were parents in that classroom that supported the teacher. So there are people with different positions on this. And so in Canada, I'm saying we need to have choices. Maybe we need to have different schools. Next slide. We have on our school board websites, sex support information on school board website. You can Google, you can find this, go to the next slide, and I'm not going to read it, but this is, if you're on the school board website and you're in grade 6 and you find information about non-discrimination and things like that, this is what you come across. Next slide. Who's in charge? An American comes up, or no, Ben Levin, who started all of this curriculum back in 2004, 2005. He was the Deputy Minister of Education. In June of last year, he was charged with producing, distributing child pornography. Next slide. Yep, next slide. They're going through the process right now. Who's in charge? You got to check out who's in charge of this at your University of Hawaii with your teachers. Our universities, many universities now have this Center for Sexual Diversity Studies. Not university, this is the teacher education department. Okay? And we had a conference just last fall, and it was called Bodies at Play, Sexuality, Childhood, and the Classroom Life. And I got to share with you who our keynote speaker was, because he came from the States. Thank you. No, but you need to know. No, you need to know, because, again, this is international. Not coming up. There we go. Do the next one. James Kincaid is the keynote speaker. The other presenter, Gail Bolt, she's a native Hawaiian as well. But James Kincaid, as a professor, he wrote a couple of books. One called Child Loving, The Erotic Child in the Victorian Culture. And basically he engages in an academic argument that he doesn't say he's in favor of pedophilia. But he says, next slide, basically what's wrong with thinking about it. Dr. Kincaid says in this book, if the child is desirable, then to desire it can be hardly freakish. To maintain otherwise is to put into operation pretty hefty engines of denial and self-deception. This guy is the keynote speaker at a conference for education leaders in my province. NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association, lists Kincaid and his information to defend their position, and their theme is sex before 8 or it's too late. Okay? He calls himself a theoretical pedophile. It's okay to think about it. He's been condemned by New York Times, Daily Mail, but he's still teaching in my schools. He plans to offer this material. Anyway, let's go on. That's right. That's right. But this is what's coming, okay? This is what's coming here. Massachusetts approved same-sex marriage in 2003. Here's something. Why should we be concerned? In the last 6 years, they've done studies on students. They just give them, it's this anonymous survey asking them about their sexual activity. 50% increase in the last 6 years in high-risk sexual activity, anal sex. 50% increase. Next slide. Why be concerned? Center for Disease Control shows that from 2008 to 2010, there's been a 22% increase. 22% increase in HIV infection rates diagnosed each year amongst males. What age? 13 to 24. Next slide. Now, we're often told, no, you get HIV from injection drug use and all the rest of it. Have a look at this one. Center for Disease Control. 13 to 19, 20 to 24-year-olds. You can get it through male-to-male sexual contact, injection drug use, heterosexual contact. Have a look at male-to-male sexual contact. 92.8% of HIV infections, new infections, were as a result of male-to-male sexual contact. Only 1.4% injection drug use, heterosexual contact. But as Bob says, we can't tell our kids that. I was in a sex ed policy meeting. And I'm sitting there and I said, okay, if we're going to teach about sex ed, if we're going to teach about anal and oral sex, then let's talk about the consequences. Let's talk about the risks. Let's talk about, and I had the risks from my own provincial health department. And I was told, no, you can't do that because that would be offensive to the homosexual community. And not only that, but our policy in our schools, and it's coming here, is if a student in a classroom, when we're talking in Pono Choices class, for example, says, I understand people have the right to choose how they engage in sexual activity, but I choose not to because, and they quote the medical evidence, they'll be labeled homophobic. It will be written up in their student records. They will be disciplined. They're not even allowed to speak evidence. They're not even allowed to engage in an academic discussion that involves truth because it's offensive. Next slide. Will this happen in Hawaii? GLSEN is here. GLSEN is here. Next slide. Radford High School, not Radford, sorry, Farrington High School, was targeted. And in 2012, I think it was, 2013, no, May 2013, the students they set up the first GSA club. They were honored in New York City for establishing the first GSA club. Last fall, when I was here touring the islands, we heard there were 28 high schools that had GSA clubs from one the May before. All right, this is growing. Next slide. And remember, these are the kids that are going to be responsible for anti-bullying. Will this happen in Hawaii as we toured? Principals and teachers told us it's already here, Phil. I feel so bad teaching kids in grade 6 how to put condoms on a banana. This was told to me by a principal. She was in tears. Memos from the DOE take these traditional valued books are to be removed from the library, and books that support sexual diversity are on the recommended purchase list. As a matter of fact, I talked to daycare director, and she was told she gets this list of books, and she's been given this package of books that she's supposed to read to kids in her daycare, ages 2 and 3, about alternative families and things like that. Okay. Preschool conferences. GLSEN recently they host anti-bullying legislation. It shouldn't be legislation. It should be instruction. And you know the HSTA was in favor of same-sex marriage. Next slide. And I'm not labeling teachers. It's the leadership, okay? It's the leadership. All right? So let's get to the end here. Before same-sex marriage, we had some comprehensive sex ed, anal or etc., but it was all supplementary, and if you asked, you could opt out, you could be considered and respected. But after same-sex marriage, this all becomes compulsory. It all becomes compulsory. Next slide. Here's the conclusion. After same-sex marriage, the direct effects, sexual lifestyle messaging integrated in all subjects, mandate GSA clubs. Administrators say, professional teachers, you park your faith at the school entrance and put on the cloak of the provincial code of conduct or your state religion. Indirect effects. Faith clubs are no longer allowed in our schools. And the principals say it's because your values are in conflict with the GSA club. And for us to allow a faith club would mean we're endorsing your values, and that would be offensive to the GSA club. Okay? Diplomatic disagreement in classrooms equals homophobia. Parental rights to be informed is being stripped out. It's happened in Massachusetts. It's happened in California. Actually, the circuit court decision said that schools did not have to inform parents. Washroom, change room decisions. School boards are now saying students use whichever washroom, change room, shower facilities you feel most comfortable with that day. Okay? I think that kind of legislation has come forward here in Honolulu, isn't it, also? Increased sexual experimentation by students. That's happened. Church teaching and programs are being challenged. The church has been pushed out, and it's leading to the church actually withdrawing from all public affairs. Okay? It's reverse discrimination, and it's allowed under what is called equity. Because equity does not mean equality. Equity means we can put in place policies, legislation, and curriculum to protect minority groups, even if it discriminates against everybody else. That's what equity means. Okay? After same-sex marriage, we have to unite, organize, advocate for their faith, advocate for our faith, build relationships with schools, teachers, and administrators, and seek accommodations that are guaranteed that are not guaranteed in legislation. And this actually wasn't the PowerPoint that I put together, but that's okay. It was the one that I did last fall. But I'll just update you. We have, what can you do as parents? You have a fantastic opt-out legislation. I read it through, and it says, Regulation 2210 says, parents, under your own volition, please share your needs, your concerns with curriculum, sensitive curriculum, and we will inform you. That's what it says. Well, I paraphrased it. That's what it says. So, and we have something similar in different school boards. So what we did is we created this letter. And the letter just says, we understand, we accept the fact that we live in a secular world, a secular society, and there may be times when curriculum has to come in that may be sensitive. We're asking that we want to work with the school. We're asking you to inform us. Could you do that, please? And we're then tell the schools the kinds of things that we think would be sensitive, such as values, neutral instruction, occultic principles and practices, and you can check off what applies, and then it goes down here about the sexual health issues, etc. And then just says, and then there's a page that says, here's why we believe what we believe. And it quotes the health information and things like that. Okay? Here's why we believe what we believe. Whoops, that one's blank, sorry. And then it just says, if there's a problem, can you inform me ahead of time, because I want to take responsibility for my child. I got to tell you, the problem with your legislation is this. It says teachers must inform and must provide alternative activities. What's the problem? You're putting a lot of extra pressure on your teachers. Okay? So, you don't want to do that. You want to say, I just want to be informed so I can talk to my kids about what they're learning, help them to understand how it applies to them, maybe as a person of faith, whether you're, in Canada, a Muslim, a Hindu, a Baptist, Pentecostal, how it applies to us, our faith, as a person of faith living in a secular world. Or if I feel it's too sensitive, I may choose to book my kid for a dentist appointment that time, or to do something with them. I'll take responsibility for it. The other thing we've done is this. We've got teachers that have written alternative activities, and we're providing those alternative activities to the schools. So instead of just being a hindrance, or we're actually working to create solutions and to become, because unless we as the church can become an asset to the system, they're going to continue to ignore us. We have to become an asset. So I was asked, and I'll just conclude now, I was asked to come back, and we're going to share with you about this organization in Ontario we call Peace. And the church has asked me to come and said, gee, do you think we could create something like that here in Hawaii? Something called Peace Hawaii. And if you might be interested in finding out more about that, over at the side where my wonderful wife is, and at the back, I think Eva, do you want to wave? Okay. Eva has, she has a contact form that you can fill in. There's also a brochure there about Peace Hawaii and what we would hope to achieve. Again, the goal is to inform families about sensitive curriculum, provide them with the tools to be able to communicate their needs and their faiths, and then to become an asset to the system. All right? That's what it's about. So if you're interested, please see Eva or my wife over there. Fill in the form, and we'll keep you in touch, or keep in touch with you. Thank you.
Thanks. I'd like to invite you now, if you have any questions for Rep. McDermott or Phil Lees, we have a live mic in the aisle. And please address your question to one of these gentlemen, and I'd be happy to field them.
My name is, can you hear me?
The mic's live. You got to get close, though.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Arvid Youngquist. I reside in Kalihi Valley. During the time the Board of Education was an elected body, I ran 3 times. I'm not a candidate this year for anything. I appreciate Mr. Philman Lee's address, very informative. I was surprised that Professor Bob McDermott provided a very illuminating PowerPoint. My comment is this. I'm not sure how long Representative McDermott has been back in the State House, but during the last governor's race, one of the issues was the teachers' furlough. And there was a proposal which passed, constitutional amendment, to make the Board of Education appointed. This year, I believe there's a bill to raise the pay of the superintendent by at least $100,000. Now, shall we reward her? Now, in Canada, the teachers may have a poster. I'm pretty sure the HSTA, which is the teachers union here, probably, I'm not certain.
Can you, we're going to...
My comment is
20 seconds each person, because we have several people, so 20 seconds. Question, please.
Any kind of response from Representative McDermott, Mr. Lee, as to what we can do this session to overturn the constitutional amendment and defeat the pay raise for the superintendent. I'm a homeschooled student for 2 years.
Okay, thank you. We have to get on to other questions. Thank you.
Can you respond to
Yeah,
those?
I will. What we're doing tonight is talking about Pono Choices. So I'm going to answer your question this way. What you can do with regard to Pono Choices, I want everybody in here tonight. And by the way, thank you for coming. Thank you. What I'd like to ask you folks to do is please write a letter to the editor. You know, you got the report there. You have my permission to plagiarize. Take those facts, because they're all documented, and write a letter to the editor. Tell them you're not happy with this. Okay? Call the school board. Call Don Horner. Let him know you're not happy. There are numbers in the book. It's Google. Let him know you're not happy with this. Okay, Mary Esther, yes.
My name is Mary Esther Correa, and I want to just emphasize that, oh my God, this is just outrageous. But there's, in the whole United States, only 5% of the population is gay and lesbian. Here in Hawaii, only 2% of the population is gay and lesbian, and they're taking over. They're bullying us. And also, now I lost my trend. But anyways, this is most important. We have to not let our children, the reason why they're targeting the young, I'm a retired high school teacher from elementary to adult education. The reason they're targeting these young minds is because their minds are so easily influenced, and because they know that if they get them when they're younger like this, they can manipulate them and impose their filthiness on our children and us.
Thank you, Mary Esther. That was a comment. Okay, again, 20 seconds question. We got to get. I want to get as many questions as we can for Mr. Lee's here and myself. Go ahead.
Mine's real quick. On that stat that you gave at 98% HIV, 13 to 19-year-old, what is the suicide rate?
The suicide rate for 13 and 19-year-olds. I guess we'd have to find out, but I can tell you for my own province, and you need to find out the suicide rate for Hawaii. I'm not sure, but in my own province, in 2010 we had 211 teen suicides. Of the 211 suicides, 9 were identified as homosexual related. Okay, that's just that's for my own province. I can't say that's the situation here in Hawaii, but yes, I am concerned about the suicide rate. We do have to respect all students. Okay, as a matter of fact, parents, when I go to school boards, they say, "Mr. Lees, what's your problem with this?" And I said, "My problem with this is this. As a father of faith, living in a secular world, my number one responsibility is to raise my children so that yes, they have to respect and learn that they need to accept and respect people who choose to live differently, but." It's my goal and my objective and my desire and my hope that my child would choose to live follow the guidelines to live the healthiest life possible, and those guidelines are found in here. Now, I'm not talking about spiritual guidelines. I'm talking about history, okay? To live for a healthy life. That's all. Sorry. No, it's going to lead to higher on that. You could be, and you're right, because like I say, 211 teen suicides, only 9 of them we could identify were connected to homosexual issues. Thank you.
Wake up, parents. They're stripping us of our rights. Did you guys hear what they said? You can opt out. That's a gimmick. Because eventually, you're going to have to accept it. And the parents have no right to say anything. Stand up. Fight back. Bob McDermott's fighting alone. Come on, guys. That's our kids, not theirs. Stand up. Take it to your church. Take it to your family, your friends. Have them all stand up. If they don't want, tell them their rights are going to be stripped.
I appreciate your comment. Can I just share with you? Right now we have 3 meetings that we're going to be hosting so far to inform families in communities. And if you're interested and you want to just fill in those contact forms, just let us know who you are and what community you're in. And if we host something, we'll keep you informed, and you can encourage your neighbors and that to come out. Because somebody said, what can we do?
Stand up.
When you take these forms in to the school and you have 20 families or 30 or 40 or 50 families in a school, and maybe Bob or maybe one of your denominational leaders, or maybe a person that has a good relationship with the principal takes them in and says, we're not bullying you, we're not asking you to change your curriculum and policies, we're just asking to be understood and accepted as well. What happens is this: as a teacher in the classroom, when I get 2 or 3 or 4 of these letters, it affects the decisions I make, because now I understand the needs of some of the other kids in my school, in my class. Okay? So that's how we can be proactive. Okay?
Thank you.
Yes, I'll make it quick. I was wondering if you invited the Pono Choices people here. I'm pretty sure a lot of us have a lot of questions for them. So I was wondering if...
That's a good question. Quite honestly, we don't know who the heck they are. There's no name associated with this. We couldn't get it, real quick, we couldn't get it from the DOE. They sloughed us off to the UH. UH wouldn't give it to us. We finally got it under the threat of litigation. They know they have a problem. And what the other lady said before, if you're here tonight and you don't like the job I'm doing, or you don't like the job anyone else is doing, you know how to fix that, right? You've got to register and make your voice heard, whether you're Republican, Democrat, green, or blue. You own the government. We work for you. You own it. Take it back. Okay.
You just took the question out of my mouth. Okay. I was going to ask how many of us are registered. How many of us are registering or trying to get our neighbors registered? How many of us are going to remember to vote? Because that's the only way that we can cure this problem. We still have that freedom, but we're going to lose it if we don't use it. Thank you.
Thank you.
The question that I have, Bob, is that when we had all of this thing going on with the civil bill back in the day, yeah, all of our church people, yeah, all our faith people here who went down, you know, we just let it go. They never stopped working. So look how long they've been working. We need to work just as hard for our faith, our family values, and our beliefs. And we gotta change legislation by changing all our government that is for this. That's the only way we're gonna do. We gotta support Bob over here. We gotta support the people that support our family values, not their family values, ours. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Kurt. Remember, we're trying to take 20 seconds, question or comment.
Just a quick question about homeschooling and how it's being affected.
You know, we're not there yet. They haven't tried to reach in there yet, although there was a bill I voted on against today. They want to mandate private schools participate in sexual surveys of their children. These are private schools where parents pay the tuition so they don't have to waste time in the public schools doing all sorts of these things. Of course, that's done under the guise of health and safety and STD prevention. So it's insidious. Mr. Lees mentioned earlier about stopping the churches. There's a bill before us. It's pending right now. No, it was deferred indefinitely, which means that they I think it was deferred indefinitely, to stop churches from renting high schools. Okay? If they don't believe in the state religion, as he calls it, sexual orientation. Was that deferred or is it deferred? Okay, next, please. We got about 15 minutes, so we got to move quickly.
Hi, I just wanted to thank you so much for having this meeting and everything. And I work as an educational assistant in a middle school, and you guys are talking about unions, and the state of Hawaii. I don't know if you guys know that, but if you work in the school, it's mandated that you are a part of the union. I'm a person of faith. I hear all this stuff that they support, you know, like same-sex marriage and honestly, like the unions support a lot of liberal and controversial stuff that my money that I don't want to go over there is mandated to go over there. Now, over $300 a year they take from me. Wow. Now, times that by about 30,000 people in my union. That's a lot of money. Now, unions understand money. So how about I propose that we become a real right-to-work state. That I think that, you know, if all of a sudden people in our people of faith, when we have a real choice to say, hey, you're supporting this with my money, I don't think so.
So, do you have a question? We have to move along.
I just wanted to put it out there that.
Thank you for your comments. Yeah. Really appreciate it. Next, please.
Hi, Rep. Ward. I was at the meeting yesterday for the BOE, and my question is, the majority of the testimonies for the Pono Choices overwhelmingly against it. The question is, who do we contact? Is it BOE, Horner,
yes,
or Matayoshi? Because the former educators were saying the parents should be contacting the principals. So,
I would do all of the above.
Okay.
I think Don Horner's chairman of the board.
Correct.
He seems like a very reasonable and nice man. I think he's willing to listen to reasonable people. Everyone who testified, and thank you, was reasonable. But I would do all of the above. Superintendent, principal of your local school, tell them, hey, we don't want this in here. I can tell you already, because the principals I've talked to, they're aware of the controversy, and they don't want any controversy at their school. Okay. So make sure they know, your principal, that it's unacceptable. So thank you for what you're doing.
So it's whose decision? Who has the final decision?
The principal
BOE
bring it
DOE?
in.
The principal?
BOE can pull it, and they're studying that right now because of your efforts yesterday. So give yourself a hand, by the way.
Okay. Okay, so parents, everyone here, remember November, clean the House and clean the Senate, because as Phil Lees was saying, because their tipping point, our tipping point was SB 1. We need to hold these legislators accountable. So it doesn't matter what party, union, whatever, it's how they vote your values. Remember November, clean the House and Senate.
By the way, one other thing you can do when you go home tomorrow, call your local legislator and ask them, hey, what do you know about Pono Choices? They don't have the curriculum. They only gave out 2 copies. I got one of them. They don't know. Okay, question, sir.
Yes, Representative McDermott, I want to thank you for being a lion. And in the most manly way I know how to say this, I love you.
Well, in a manly way, I accept.
Your reward in heaven will be great.
Thank you.
That said, my question is actually for Mr. Lees.
Okay, Phil.
Sorry about
yes,
that.
Sir. Yes, sir. Mr. Lees, my question is there any place in the world besides Russia, I might add, where we're seeing a little bit of pushback or where there's actually some victories going on in terms of our side pulling, pushing back and actually...
Very little. In Ontario, we are, I've been advocating for faith families for 17 years. It's just been the last year that our churches have started to wake up. Okay, they've got this thread of the sex ed curriculum, and it's gone beyond that. Now it's integrating something that's in conflict with your values, every subject, every day. Oh, okay. And our churches now are starting to wake up. I've tried for the last 5 years to get meetings with, like, it would be your state leadership at a denominational level, Assemblies of God or whatever, right? They're now starting to knock on my door. All right, and so they're willing to start to work together. Okay, so Peace used to be just a small community group for the city of Hamilton. In the last 8 months, it went provincial. We're now in 11 of 35 school board regions, influencing in 11 of 35 school board regions, and we've now started to go international. Last year I was in Minnesota. I'm in Hawaii. I was at a conference in California. I've got 7 or 8 states asking, so I think we've got. But what has to happen is this: we have to train families how to communicate in the right ways. Okay, we can't just be overthrowing the tables. Christ only did that against the religious leaders. Okay, we have to be firm. Absolutely. We have to be uncompromising, but we have to learn how to communicate. The seminars that we're going to do in the next few weeks are going to show you what that looks like. We've got a pattern, a template, and the letter is a tool to communicate. All right. Now, one thing that Bob asked me to share is this. In my province, when they started this, after same-sex marriage, they made very, very small incremental movements. In one way, you're lucky, because Pono Choices, I got to tell you, we don't even have Pono Choices in Ontario, and we've been doing this for now 10 years. I think they overreached. Take advantage of it. Okay? You need to take advantage of it. Okay?
In a manly way. Love you back.
Hi, hello. I'm Stephen, and I was just going to share something with you. You know, my wife and I have been involved in church leadership and building families for God, which is really neat. But I just want to share something with you from the business perspective. And this is true story, okay? Naturally. When SB 1 passed, it scared the hell out of the Department of Health. Right afterwards, on November 21st, they put out an RFQ, how they buy things, okay? We're a vendor for the state. We have been for over 20 years. To purchase 537,000 condoms. And now, that's one thing, but the ones that's doing the buying is the STD and HIV testing center in Kaimuki. They're clients of mine. They're great people. They're great people. When they saw what happened, and then I think they probably knew that this kind of education, homosexual education, is going to hit the schools. They're not going to be, they're already swamped. So they can see if they're going to be even more swamped with more testing, all this stuff. So they bought them, and it's done. So they're doing the best that they only know what to do is to try to provide some means of prevention out there. But as a parent, I'm on the PTSO board of my school, and we're involved with the community. And as parents, you're going to say, do I have time to even pay attention to this? This is our future. You have the time. You have the time. You have the time. When you start seeing the stats come up on HIV and STD, that is crazy. When they're introducing it at this level of school, anywhere, it's crazy. So you have to think about who is the mentality of the people that are introducing this in the school.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate your comment.
Thank you.
Mary Esther, second time. She's irrepressible. You cannot take the microphone away from her.
Well, first of all, Bob, I keep encouraging him that I got his back. I got his back. He's doing the right thing. He's doing the Pono thing. Secondly, don't forget, there's no cure for AIDS. No cure. Period.
Thank you. Attorney Jim Hochberg, famous attorney in Honolulu.
Some people say infamous. I just want to share that you're not alone. There's Hawaii Family Advocates that you can join to help organize yourself, Hawaii Family Forum. There's these Mama Bear and Papa Bear groups. If you don't know about that stuff, talk to Keith, because you're not by yourself, and we can work together better than we can work on our own. Thanks.
Thank you.
A million.
Mrs. Steiner.
Thank you so much for what you're doing, Bob. This is awesome. I just wanted to say that this really angers me, and I just want to know what I can do as a parent to reach out to other parents and make this heard, because this is ridiculous and it's disgusting. And I don't want my child to be learning any of this.
So the good news is it's not in EVA at all. What you can do is, again, call Don Horner's office. His number's in the book. Leave a message. Send him an email. Tell him, get this out. I've read the report. It's objectionable. And let your principal know if you have an intermediate student, please don't bring this in. I went to a presentation. Have you seen the curriculum? Have you read the report? And they'll say no. So they may be getting pressured to take it in. It's very problematic. It's inaccurate. So that's what you would do, Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm a mother of two and a grandmother of two, and my question is to Mr. Lee.
Phil.
Phil.
You're going back.
Phil. I have a lot of parents in Hawaii. They are concerned about these Pono Choices, but I have a lot of parents who are concerned, but they only talk. They're not willing to do action.
Yep.
These are parents of private school kids.
Yes.
So I want to know, has private schools been infiltrated? How long, or have they been infiltrated in Canada?
No.
Since
Not yet. Not yet. But this is what's going to happen. Public schools, and it's a sweeping over the public schools. Okay, starting with the urban centers and then moving into the rural areas, and that's publicly funded secular and Catholic schools. Then the private schools, the targets on them, because, and they're going to start with secondary. Secondary schools, I don't know what your requirement for certification is for a private school to give high school graduation diploma and credits. Okay? No, I mean, but in our province, the curriculum has to be 75% consistent with the government curriculum. Okay? Now, when the government starts saying we have to integrate all of this additional information and the private schools are no longer 75% consistent, they'll lose their accreditation. They will not be able to grant high school graduation diplomas. That's how they're going to do it. I spent 2 years at the ministry, and I've got friends there, and I got the inside track. So.
Okay, the reason why I'm asking that question, because I have a lot of parents of private school that is taking this very casual.
Yep.
Because they feel it's not going to affect their kids.
That's right.
You know, so I'm telling them it's going to affect your kids.
Your
because
kids,
that's the agenda of the LGBT in the future. So
their kids are going to have to live in the society of the kids raised in the public schools.
Yeah, so I'm trying to tell parents, you got to wake up. Whether your kid goes to public schools, because it's going to start with the public.
Yep.
Eventually, it's going to go to private schools.
Eventually.
But we're not going to wait till that happens. So we have to get involved, whether you're in public or private.
My biggest supporters in Ontario, Canada, are homeschoolers, and second are private schoolers.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Mine's from a totally different perspective. As a businessman, I saw liability up there tonight. You mentioned AIDS is not curable. The numbers that they put up there on the incident and the lack of transparency about it, Bob, if I was the Attorney General of this state, I'd be quaking in my boots concerning the liability. That in itself is enough to kill this whole deal.
He's got the governor to support him. Oh, sorry, I didn't say that.
Next, please.
I was wondering, this is a question for you, Representative. Is there any way that we could take this to a vote for the people as far as whether we have this kind of program in our schools?
No, there's not. We do not have referendum, recall, or initiative or anything like that. But what you can do is call Don Horner, call Kathy Matayoshi, send them an email. Please, you know, you have enough people here tonight that they get 100 tomorrow, they know they got a problem.
See, one thing on the CDC website is that there's a special case here in Hawaii. There's the highest rate of conversion from HIV to AIDS in Native Hawaiians and Polynesians. It's 1 year, 49%. That means death. So, you know, people have to know that.
The truth will help us win this battle. Next, please. We're getting down to the end here. Probably got about 5 minutes left. Actually, we got about 2 minutes left, so make it quick.
Thanks, Bob. I just had two questions. And this is more for relevance. I guess, you know, we're talking about tonight procreation, sexual education. So, and from medical accuracy. So what percentage,
Mr. Phil Lees.
Mr. Lees, as you know it, based on all your studies, what percentage of all known couples engaged in same-sex activities have given birth through their anal canal. I mean, I know it sounds silly, but that's kind of the crux of it. It's what it comes down to. I mean, we're doing all of this, but in reality, that's what it is. And then as a Hawaiian, and I'm, half Hawaiian, you'd mentioned, Bob, about Alulike contributing to some of the information on the Pono Choices. So what is the percentage of Hawaiian children, 11 and over, that are actively engaged in Pono Choices? Do they know?
Your good question. So they take what we find that I can't speak on it, but you can, and certainly Paul and Karen can. The hijacking of the Hawaiian language to wrap this objectionable curriculum in it, to kind of give it the Hawaiian seal of approval, when it's really about a money grab, because this came from Washington, D.C. So if you want the grant, $1 million, $2 million, it's $900,000, I think it was. To get this money, you have to teach this. So to localize it, they just wrap it around, and I believe that was Alulike's role, to wrap the native Hawaiian words and stuff around it and weave in stories. But Planned Parenthood created the curriculum with another group called Adult Advocacy for Youth. Now, Adult Advocacy for Youth makes Planned Parenthood look like the Tea Party. It's really bad. We've got about 2 minutes left, so we got to get through the rest of these questions. Thank you, Brian Jeremiah.
Thanks, Bob. So this is more just fear-mongering than anything else. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
The truth. We got to give them the truth. Yes. 2 quick questions, then we're going to wrap it up.
I wanted to ask you, Governor Abercrombie wants to start preschools, public preschools in the state. Now, he's going to, do you know what kind of curriculum he's going to provide for them? And what the parents are going to do to help protect the children?
Let me just say, I wouldn't let him babysit my kids. Next.
I just want to say I'm actually an aunt, but I love my nephews and my nieces, so I'm here to represent those without children. We care. And my question is, how long would it take to get something that's actually accurate and not so divisive or not so indoctrinating? How long would it take to get a curriculum that we can submit as an alternative? Because this isn't Pono. I'm also Hawaiian, and it just bothers me that it's called Pono Choices, but how long would it take?
Good question. That was the last question. We had a curriculum. We used to be, when George Bush was president, in order to get the federal money, you had to teach abstinence only. So we taught abstinence only because we wanted that $1 million, $2 million. When President Obama's president, to get that money, you got to teach this newfangled way of thinking. So we go after the money, and this is what we end up with. It's not organic from you, the values that you care about as a community. So in closing, I want to thank all of you tonight for coming. I want to thank Keith. I want to thank Paul. And I want to thank Mr. Phil Lees for their great work. Let's give them a hand. So with that, we're going to end the program. Thank you so very much. Aloha, and God bless you all. And make sure you call tomorrow, please.